Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer! Welcome to episode 121 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and on this show, we discuss the craft and art of game mastering. Today, I'm going to discuss the latest revision of the Ranger class for D&D released by Wizards of the Coast. So this is in the newest Unearthed Arcana article on Wizards' website, and probably want to follow along with that as I discuss it today. So if you head to the show notes for episode 121 at starwalkerstudios.com, I will have a link directly to the Unearthed Arcana article that I'm discussing. So I wanted to talk about this today, not just because, it's the first major revision that we've seen for D&D 5th edition, but I think it's also an interesting example of how changes can be made to a class, and also gives us some insight into some of the thought processes behind designing classes for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So even if you're not playing D&D, I think that you can probably glean some tidbits of information just by looking behind the curtain and seeing how these things are designed in a game. So the first obvious question here is, why are we revising the Ranger to begin with? Now, if you want an in-depth answer to that question, just head on over to Google and use your Google Foo, and there is lots and lots of discussion on the internet about the 5th edition Ranger and why various people feel that it is not a strong class, in case many people feel that it's the weakest class in the game. And as you may be aware, Wizards has been doing lots of surveys. They do one almost every month, it seems like, of D&D players for the new version of the game. And if you haven't been paying attention to those, and if you're into D&D or you play or run D&D, I would definitely, visit the website every once in a while and take those surveys when they're available, because it's a chance for you to give Wizards your opinion about various aspects of the game. Each survey is usually targeted to a certain topic, and they ask for feedback about products that they've released and Unearthed Arcana articles. And there have been more than one surveys that have touched upon the Ranger and other classes and what people like or don't like about it. So the thing with the Ranger, and when I go into this particular Unearthed Arcana, I think we'll get into this a little bit more. Consistently, it is viewed as the weakest class in the game, and there are many players who are dissatisfied with it. And my understanding is the majority of dissatisfaction with the Ranger is actually with one of the archetypes, which is the Beastmaster Ranger. We have the Hunter archetype, and I think for the most part, people have been happy with the Hunter, and it's seen as an effective class at play. But unfortunately, the Beastmaster, not so much. And again, this is a pretty deep subject to dig into, and I don't want to spend the whole episode talking about why people don't like the Ranger. But my understanding is some of the big kind of issues with the Beastmaster is, for one, the animal companion that you get as part of the class doesn't scale at all. So they're not honestly terribly useful companions at first level. I mean, you're talking something limited to CR 1/4. And so they're not terribly useful at first level, and they get exceedingly less useful each level beyond that, because you're always getting a CR 1/4 animal companion. It doesn't scale at all. The other big problem that I've heard people mention about the Beastmaster is that your animal companion uses your action. So if you want your animal companion to actually do anything useful in a fight, in a again, how useful can a CR1/4 animal be, especially if you're like 10th level or something? You have to use your action to do so. So if we look at the Ranger in the player's handbook on page 93 under Beastmaster Ranger's Companion, it tells us that on your turn, you can verbally command the beast where to move, which doesn't require an action on your part. But you can also command the beast to either attack, dash, disengage, dodge, or help. So you can have it do one of those specific actions. However, giving that command does take your action. So basically, you're sacrificing your action in which you could, make an attack, or if you're high enough level, make multiple attacks or cast a spell or something like that. You're sacrificing that to have your animal companion attack or dash or disengage or something like that. And it's just a no-win scenario, because even at first level, your animal companion's attack isn't going to be nearly as effective as your own. So why would you ever sacrifice your attack to have the animal attack? And maybe, there might be situations where the animal's in range and you're not, or something like that. But even then, it's going to be an inferior attack to what you could have done yourself. So, that was done, I think, as a way to try to balance, so that the ranger has to sacrifice their action to have the animal do something. But in the end, it ended up not being balanced. Instead of being overbalanced, it was underbalanced, and basically led to the ranger's companion being pretty much useless. So one thing that I really like about the Unearthed Arcana articles is that they often include some discussion of game design, and specifically of design for D&D. So even if you don't play D&D and you have no interest in D&D, if you're someone who likes homebrewing stuff for whatever game you play, I would recommend checking out all of the Unearthed Arcana articles and downloading the PDFs and reading them. And at the very least, just reading the introduction to each one, because a lot of them will have discussion on kind of the process and philosophy and strategy that they're using to design these things. So for instance, one of the recent Unearthed Arcanas was about feats and introduced some new feats, but even more importantly, I think, had a great discussion at the beginning about how they design feats for the game and what they're looking for in a good feat versus a not so good feat, and really, really enlightening things. And again, if you're running your D&D, it's going to be very helpful if you want to homebrew your own feats. But even if you're not, I think you could maybe learn something about how games are designed and balanced that you could apply to your own game. This is the part of the show where I give a shout out and thank you to all the patrons of Starwalker Studios. You all make this show possible. Thank you very much for your support. And I also want to especially thank my Tier 4 patron, Mr. Steve Strickland. Let's hear it for Steve. Yeah. Woo. Go, Steve. Yes. You the man. So as a thank you for their support, patrons get some cool little perks from me for being a patron of Starwalker Studios. Among those, a monthly podcast I do just for the patrons. And I also upload some of my Primordia content for the patrons to use in their home games or as inspiration. So you can find out all about being a patron of Starwalker Studios on my Patreon page, and you can find a link to that at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. So to begin our discussion of the revised Ranger today, I actually want to share with you the introduction to this because I think it's really interesting and I think we can learn some things from this. So it says, over the past year, you've seen us try a number of new approaches to the Ranger, all aimed at addressing the class's high levels of player dissatisfaction and its ranking as D&D's weakest class by a significant margin. And again, this is based on surveys that they've done that you can participate in. Just off the top of my head, some of the previous efforts made at addressing these problems with the Ranger that I can think of, there's been quite a few Unearthed Arcanas that had something Ranger related in them. We had a spell-less version of the Ranger presented for those of you who want to play a Ranger who doesn't use magic at all and instead got some other abilities. Among them, the ability to make poultices, which gives some healing benefits, which was pretty cool. We also had some new Ranger archetypes presented. For instance, the Deep Stalker Ranger, which is a Ranger skilled at being in the Underdark and fighting in the Underdark. So, this is something that they've been taking stabs at already in previous Unearthed Arcanas, but the one we have today is definitely the most extensive, where it's a complete rewrite of the class. So back to the article, those two factors combined to put us on the path to this revision. We have classes that rate as weak, but which nonetheless have high levels of player satisfaction. That tells us people playing those classes are happy with how their characters' abilities work and with their own experience at the table, even if those classes aren't the strongest. After all, not every class can rank at the top. And that's a really good point. I mean, this idea of balance is kind of an abstract thing. And at the end of the day, you can never have complete true balance. You can't have a game like D&D with as many classes and options as it has and have every one of those classes and archetypes be completely equally powerful and effective, right? It's just not possible. So there is going to be some variance there. The goal, I think, is to keep that variance narrow enough that it doesn't make options like the Beastmaster Ranger, where anybody that knows what they're doing just isn't going to play it because it's just so underpowered compared to everything else. The other interesting thing here is they mention that there are other classes that are significantly weaker, but that people still like. And, that was part of the problem, I think, with the Ranger too, is I don't think that they really nailed the class thematically and conceptually, as well as not nailing it mechanically. And, something that was teased out in these surveys that they've done is that you can have a class that maybe isn't as strong as other classes, but if it's really flavorful and it's really thematic and it's addressing a need or a type of character that people want to play, and it does that well from a kind of flavor and conceptual point of view, that a lot of players are willing to overlook some mechanical disadvantage if they're really getting to play the thing that they want to play. And so that was seen as part of the problem with the Ranger. Is not only is there a mechanical problem with it where it's not measuring up, but the flavor and thematic aspects of the class aren't strong enough or aren't aligned well enough with what people want to make the class something that people want to play. The article says, likewise, most issues we see with classes are confined to specific abilities that don't play a big role in determining whether players like the class as a whole. In other words, no class is perfect, but each is close enough to the mark in its own way that players are happy. As such, the Ranger's status as a sore spot for players has been a cause for concern for a while. And so today we present a new revision of the Ranger. Though it retains many of the elements of the existing class, a lot has changed, so it's best to simply dig into the new material to get a sense of how it feels. But what I'd like to address here is how the D&D game will evolve in the future. Any change as dramatic as rebuilding a character class requires planning, verification, and a clear, easy implementation. And I just want to pause here to just acknowledge what Wizards is doing here. They put out the Player's Handbook. They put out 5th edition. We have numerous products for 5th edition now. And they are acknowledging that, one of these core classes, the Ranger in the Player's Handbook, that there are problems. And these aren't just perceived problems by some players, but they're real problems that are seen by a majority of the players. And instead of ignoring this or making excuses or I don't know, some other half-assed attempt to address it, they grabbed the bull by the horns and they're saying, we're going to redo the class and we're going to get it right. And I think that's really cool because maybe some of us are spoiled and we're lucky enough that we play games like Dungeons and Dragons that are well supported, where you have errata for the various books and where when there's a problem like this, it's addressed and things are revised, where we have things like the Unearthed Arcana and the Sage Advice, where you have free resources online to help you run the game and to give you more options for the game. And I know there are other games other than D&D that are well supported like this. And so if you're fortunate enough that the games you play are like that, then maybe it's not a big deal to you. But I can say from personal experience that not all games are so well supported. Some games, they just put out the book and that's it. That's all you get. You don't get a revised edition. You don't get errata that you can download from a website or anything like that. So coming from that perspective or that experience, it seems to me that Wizards is really going above and beyond here. I mean, they've already released errata for all the core books of the game. And above and beyond that, they're doing this major revision of the Ranger class, which is taking man hours to do, is taking resources to do, and they don't have to do it. So I think it's really cool that they are. And in addition, they're using feedback that they're getting from various surveys to guide them and inform them to make the best revision that they can. The planning phase goes back to our review of playtest feedback. We review data and read anecdotes on Reddit, forums, and social media. We try to decide if addressing the issue is worth the potential disruption to the game. In this case, we felt that a few factors combined to push for a change. Many players want to play Rangers, but few were happy with the class, which held its place at the bottom of class power rankings by a significant margin. The class's individual features also filled the top 10 list of lowest rated individual character features. And that's another kind of key element to this, is not only is the Ranger seen as underpowered and not as good a choice as the other classes, but at the same time, it's a very popular class. It's a class that a lot of people want to play. So that makes it even more important that they get it right. With our course set for a revision, we've spent the past year experimenting and gathering feedback, and they definitely have. We believe that if something doesn't hit the mark the first time, we need to take our time and make sure our path to a solution is the right one. So our tinkering with the Ranger led us here to this latest update. Our next step, which begins now, is verification. Are these fixes correct? Do they solve the problems at your table? Do you, as the community of D&D players and DMs, accept them? I expect another revision or two to be made to the class. So, that's something to note here. This isn't the final version, probably. They're going to get feedback on this and maybe do another revision, get feedback on that, maybe do another revision until they get it right. So I expect another revision or two to be made to the class, but I'm confident that the scope and direction of these changes fit in with what the community is looking for. Finally, we come to implementation. If this iteration of the Ranger or a future revision of it grades high enough, our plan is to present it as a revised Ranger in a future D&D sourcebook. Players can select the original Ranger or the revised version, though DMs will always be free to use only one or the other. Both will be legal for D&D Adventurers League play, if you care about that. And players of existing Ranger characters will have the option to swap to the revised version. Again, they're talking about organized play. As you'll see as you read further, the original Ranger and the revised class use almost identical progression tables, even if the specifics of some features differ. With a little work on our end, we can ensure that any new Ranger options we provide work for both classes. And that is really awesome and something I want to point out too. Not only are they just going to fix the Ranger and give you a new and improved Ranger to use in your game, but they're going to do work on their end to make sure that in the future after that, any new material that they provide for the Ranger will be compatible with both the original Ranger in the player's handbook and their new revised version, which will be in some supplement or product later. God, I hope it's not a Forgotten Realms product. It better not be. I mean, you can't revise a core class and then make it Forgotten Realms specific, but I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, I think that's really cool because I could see them or another company doing a revision like this, and then that's it. And it's on the DM's shoulders to deal with any fallout of, say, a certain DM decides I'm going to keep the original Ranger or allow that as an option, and players are playing an original Ranger, but now all the future Ranger stuff that's released isn't compatible with that because it's designed for the revised Ranger. And now that DM has to figure out what to do and how to make it work. I think it's awesome that instead Wizards is saying, no, we're going to handle that on our end so that when we put stuff out for the Ranger, you can use it with either of the Rangers and it's just snap and fit. You don't have to stress yourself about it yourself, which is awesome. Overall, this approach captures our intent. Fix what needs to be fixed when it's necessary to do so, but in a way that minimizes disruption and maximizes player satisfaction. With that in mind, take a look at our new Ranger and keep an eye out for the feedback survey to follow. One of my favorite things about doing this show is hearing from listeners like you. I am always happy to get feedback from a listener, whether it's a request for a future topic or a suggestion of a way to improve the show or feedback on a topic I've already discussed. In the near future, I'm planning to do an episode on Theater of the Mind play with tips and tricks for GMs running Theater of the Mind. So if you're a Theater of the Mind GM and you have any tricks of the trade you'd like to share, that would be a great thing to send to me. I also want to do a show in the future on gaming in between your scheduled sessions and ways to keep your players engaged in between game sessions, especially if you have a period of extended downtime, ways to keep the game going through various methods of maybe forums or a Google community. Any ideas or things that you've tried that worked well for your group, I'd love to hear about. Also, ways to handle player absences, whether they're expected or unexpected. What are creative things that you can do to manage players being gone from given sessions, especially if you have a group where players kind of miss on a regular basis or, almost every week someone's missing. What are some ways that we can handle that as GMs? Those are great things to send me feedback on, and there are a lot of great ways that you can send me feedback. Probably the best is to shoot me an email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter @LexStarWalker and on Google Plus LexStarWalker. We have a Google Plus community for the show, which is another great way to share feedback. And the awesome thing about the Google Plus community is anything you share on there is shared with everybody in the community. So it's a great way to get feedback from other DMs about maybe something you've homebrewed, or maybe you want to share your campaign setting that you've come up with, or you have a question, or you just want to talk shop with other GMs and players. The Google Plus community is a great place to do that. You can find a link to the Google Plus community in the show notes for Game Master's Journey at starwalkerstudios.com. You can also find links to my YouTube channel and other things that I'm doing out on the internet. So you can find everything you're looking for really at starwalkerstudios.com. All right, now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this revised Ranger and how has Wizards attempted to fix it, and have they fixed it? So we start out with your basic class features, and these things have not changed. This is all the same. So this is your hit dice, your armor, weapon, and tool proficiencies, saving throw proficiencies, starting equipment, all that good stuff is the same. So the first change that we see to the Ranger here is in the favored enemy. A lot of it is the same. However, there are some changes. First of all, when you choose your first favored enemy at first level, you're a little more limited in the favored enemies you can choose than you are in the player's handbook. So when you choose that first favored enemy, your choices are beasts, fae, humanoids, monstrosities, or undead. And before you despair about the choices that have been removed, you do later on now get a greater favored enemy where you can choose from those other things. So you haven't lost the ability to get those other favored enemies. It's just been delayed till later in your character's career. Now, one thing that you now gain with your favored enemy that you didn't before is you get a +2 bonus to damage rolls with weapon attacks against creatures of the chosen type. You still get the advantage on wisdom survival checks to track favored enemies that you got before, and as well as on intelligence checks to recall information about them. You also, as before, gain the ability to learn a language associated with your favorite enemy. However, there's a clarification made here that isn't made in the player's handbook, which is that you're actually free to pick up any language that you wish to learn. So normally when you get this feature and you choose a favorite enemy, you would choose either a language spoken by that enemy or creatures associated with it, but you don't have to. So if maybe the favorite enemy doesn't have a language, then you can choose any language you want, or you can just choose any language you want regardless. Now, it's of course the DM's prerogative to maybe enforce that, so if you're taking, let's see, what are our choices here? Let's say you're taking Fae as a favorite enemy, and Fae speaks Sylvan, and you don't speak Sylvan, your DM may say you have to take Sylvan. And I would probably do that as a DM because that's kind of the intent of this feature. But again, that's DM prerogative, and just going by the rules as written, you can pick any language you want. So our next feature of the Ranger is Natural Explorer, and this has seen some revisions from what's in the player's handbook. The first and most major revision, I think, is you no longer have to choose a terrain type. So in the player's handbook, you chose a type of terrain like Arctic, coast, desert, forest, grassland, mountain, swamp, or Underdark, and then you would get certain benefits in that terrain. And now it's all terrains. It doesn't matter. You don't have to choose one. So at all times, you get the following benefits. You ignore difficult terrain. So as a ranger, you never have to worry about difficult terrain. You have advantage on initiative rolls. And on your first turn during combat, you have advantage on attack rolls against creatures that have not yet acted. So you get that all the time in any terrain. And then you get the following benefits, and it's all the stuff that you got before in Natural Explorer, but now you get them all the time. They're not limited to a specific terrain. So you get these following benefits when you're traveling for an hour or more. Difficult terrain doesn't slow your group's travel. Your group can't become lost except by magical means. When you're engaged in another activity while traveling, such as foraging, navigating, or tracking, you remain alert to danger. If you're traveling alone, you can move stealthily at normal pace. When you forage, you find twice as much food as you normally would. And while tracking other creatures, you also learn their exact number, their sizes, and how long ago they passed through the area. So again, these things aren't changed from the player's handbook, but you now get these benefits all the time, not just in a specific terrain, which is awesome. We did lose one benefit from the Natural Explorer, which is when you make an intelligence or wisdom check related to your favorite terrain, your proficiency bonus is doubled if you're using a skill that you're proficient in. So the new revised version does not have that ability anymore. So I really like this. Now, we've for a long time with the Ranger had this idea of a favored terrain. I know back in second edition, that was a thing. It might have been in first edition too. I don't remember. And in a way, that's kind of a core concept of the class, this idea that, each Ranger has a certain type of environment or types of environment that she's particularly well suited for. But I think a more core part of the class, even more than that, is just that a Ranger is good in nature and good in the environment. And, we've seen in 5th edition that there's less nitpicky stuff. Things aren't drilled down so far, So I think it really fits with the spirit of 5th edition that instead of having to choose one type of terrain that you're really good in, then instead you're just good in all natural environments and really all environments. It doesn't even specify that you have to be out in nature to use these benefits. You could be in a city and use them. And I think that's really awesome. And obviously, it's much more useful than having to pick one type of terrain that you're good in to be able to use these things all the time. And it's less to worry about, as a group. Now as a DM, you don't need to necessarily worry about thinking about, what kinds of terrains will be available during this entire campaign, because I don't want the Ranger choosing underwater as their terrain, and we're never going to be underwater, right? Now you don't even have to worry about, which is cool. All right, next we have fighting styles, and this is unchanged. So you get to choose between the archery, defense, dueling, and 2-weapon fighting styles, and that's the same. Spell casting also is unchanged. So our next feature is called Primeval Awareness. And this is a feature that is in the player's handbook as well, but it's changed a bit. So the first thing is you get a new ability with this that you didn't get before. It says you have an innate ability to communicate with beasts, and they recognize you as a kindred spirit. Through sounds and gestures, you can communicate simple ideas to a beast as an action and can read its basic mood and intent. You learn its emotional state, whether it's affected by magic of any sort, its short-term needs, such as food or safety, and actions you can take, if any, to persuade it not to attack. So this is super cool, and this is one of those areas that they've addressed where the Ranger class in the game was not addressing what people think a Ranger should be able to do. And one of those things that a Ranger should be able to do is interact with animals in a better way and have a better chance of having friendly, cooperative interactions with them. And before, you could use some Ranger spells to do that, but you had to cast spells to do it and use spell slots. And now you just have this innate ability to communicate with animals and, get some cooperative interaction with them, which is super cool. You cannot use this ability against a creature that you've attacked within the last 10 minutes, which makes perfect sense. Okay, so the next aspect of primeval awareness is a little bit different than what's in the player's handbook. So in the player's handbook, beginning at 3rd level, you can use your action and expend a spell slot to focus your awareness on the region around you. And for a minute per level of the spell slot you spend, you sense whether the following types of creatures are present within a mile of you, or 6 miles if in your favorite terrain. And that's aberrations, celestials, dragons, elementals, fays, fiends, and undead. Okay, so that's changed. And instead of that, you now attune your senses to determine if any of your favored enemies lurk nearby. You spend 1 minute in concentration, and you can sense whether any of your favorite enemies are present within 5 miles of you. This feature reveals which of your favorite enemies are present, their numbers, and the creature's general direction and distance in miles from you. If there are multiple groups of your favorite enemies within range, you learn this information for each group. So basically, to summarize the changes here, you no longer have to use a spell slot to do this. You can do this at 1st level. You don't have to wait till 3rd level. But instead of detecting things like aberration and fey and things like that, you're detecting your favorite enemy. So, I think that the previous one makes sense. Like you're detecting things that aren't, quote, natural. But I like this one better because it's more useful. You don't have to burn spell slots to use it, and you can use it at any level. And I just think it kind of makes more sense because it's tied to your favorite enemy. And I like that. I like that it's tied with your favorite enemy. All right, our next feature is Ranger Conclave. And these are basically the Ranger archetypes. So now they're calling them conclaves, which is cool. The conclaves have changed a bit, so we'll cover that in a minute. Next is ability score improvement. Those are the same. And now we have our greater favored enemy. So at 6th level, you are ready to hunt even deadlier game. Choose a type of greater favored enemy, and that can be aberrations, celestials, constructs, dragons, elementals, fiends, or giants. You gain all the benefits against this chosen enemy that you'd normally gain against your favorite enemy, including an additional language. And again, that language, should probably thematically be the language of your favorite enemy, but that technically can be any language you want, unless, of course, your DM says differently. Your bonus to damage rolls against all your favorite enemies increases to +4. So once you're at 6th level, you're getting +4 damage against favorite enemies with weapon attacks instead of +2. Additionally, you have advantage on saving throws against the spells and abilities used by a greater favorite enemy. So this isn't going to work against your regular favorite enemy, but your greater favorite enemy, you get advantage on saving throws against their spells and abilities, which is pretty sweet. The next feature that you get is Fleet of Foot. Beginning at 8th level, you can use the dash action as a bonus action on your turn. Pretty cool. We also get the ability Hide in Plain Sight. So this ability was in the Player's Handbook Ranger, but it works differently now. So in the Player's Handbook version, you could spend a minute camouflaging yourself if you have access to fresh mud, dirt, plant soot, and other naturally occurring materials to create camouflage. And then once you were camouflaged, you could hide yourself against a solid surface and gain a +2 bonus to your dexterity stealth checks as long as you remain there without moving. So they've basically kept the spirit of that ability, but they've simplified it a lot. So starting at 10th level, when you gain this ability, you can remain perfectly still for long periods of time to set up ambushes. When you attempt to hide on your turn, you can opt to not move on that turn. If you avoid moving, creatures that attempt to detect you take a -10 penalty to their wisdom perception checks until the start of your next turn. You lose this benefit if you move or fall prone, either voluntarily or because of some external effect. You are still automatically detected if any effect or action causes you to no longer be hidden. If you are still hidden on your next turn, you can continue to remain motionless and gain this benefit until you are detected. So to summarize the changes, basically they've gotten rid of your need to spend a minute camouflaging yourself. They've also gotten rid of your need to have material with which to camouflage yourself with. Instead, you just don't move on your turn and you get the benefit. The other change is instead of giving you a +10 to your stealth roll, it's giving others a -10 to their perception checks to see you. So I don't know why they made that change, but my guess is that it might work a little bit better when the DM is using passive perception with NPCs and monsters. I think it'll be a little bit more forgiving toward the ranger and, what they roll. So, if you think about it, if you're the ranger and you're making your stealth check and you roll poorly and you're just getting a +10, you could still theoretically end up with a number that NPCs are going to just notice with their passive check. But if instead you're giving a -10 penalty to the checks of the NPCs, well, if the NPC, say, has a passive perception of 10, which I think is pretty common because that's an NPC that doesn't have a wisdom bonus and isn't proficient in the perception skill, then that would bring their passive perception down to 0, which means that they don't have any chance to see you. Even if you rolled a 1, it'd still be better than 0 as long as your perception bonus wasn't a minus, a penalty. So I don't know, that may not be the case, but it just seems to me that it just makes it easier for the GM to say, okay, I just subtract 10 from their passive perception. And it also makes it less likely that the ranger is going to be easily spotted when using this ability just because the player rolls poorly. At least when they're going up against passive perception. Now, if an NPC is actively looking for them, then there's really no difference between the two methods. So I think this definitely makes hide in plain sight more useful. You no longer need a minute to set it up, which if you're, in combat or you're doing initiative tracking, a minute is 10 rounds. So it's hardly ever going to happen once you're in initiative that you can use this ability. So this becomes more useful in combat. You can use it more often. You don't have to, be able to use it before combat starts. And you also don't need to worry about having, in essence, material components in order to use this, which makes it more convenient as well. And also, it's one less thing to worry about, one less fiddly little bit to deal with. We have Vanish is pretty much the same. Feral Senses is pretty much the same. Foe Slayer, pretty much the same. All right, so now we get into the Ranger archetypes, which we're now calling conclaves. And our first is the Beast Conclave. So this is replacing the Beastmaster archetype. And this is where we see the most changes in the Ranger class in this revision. So first up is the Animal Companion. You still get it at 3rd level, just like before. However, now with 8 hours of work and the expenditure of 50 gold pieces worth of rare herbs and fine food, you call forth an animal from the wilderness to serve as your companion. So the difference here is we have added a gold piece cost to getting an animal companion. It also specifies that you need the 8 hours to gain the companion, which I think was the intent before, because you would need 8 hours to summon a new companion if your companion died in the player's handbook version. So I think that it was probably their intent all along that it takes 8 hours to get that first companion, and they just neglected to mention that in the player's handbook. Another difference is instead of just saying it needs to be a CR 1/4 or lower beast, you're now given specific things to choose from. So your animal companion can be an ape, black bear, boar, giant badger, giant weasel, mule, panther, or wolf. And it says, however, your DM might pick one of these animals for you based on surrounding terrain and on what types of creatures would logically be present in the area. So still, it's within the realm of the DM to say what kind of creature responds to the call. So basically, as a ranger, you're sending out a call for a companion, and you're maybe specifying to the DM, like, I hope to get this kind of creature, but it's ultimately up to the DM what creature responds to the call. And, I would say if what your player wants makes sense, it's a creature that could be found in that terrain, and then give them what they want. But otherwise, you would choose something that makes sense. And another difference to how the animal companion works is what happens if the animal companion is slain. So in the player's handbook, it says if the beast dies, you can obtain another one by spending 8 hours magically bonding with another beast that isn't hostile to you, either the same type of beast before or a different one. So now the way it's working is if your animal companion is slain, the magical bond you share allows you to return it to life. With 8 hours of work and the expenditure of 25 gold worth of rare herbs and fine food, you call forth your companion's spirit and use your magic to create a new body for it. You can return an animal companion to life in this manner, even if you do not possess any part of its body. If you use this feature to return a former animal companion to life while you have a current animal companion, your current companion leaves you and is replaced by the restored companion. This is really cool. And the reason why we have this will become apparent as we delve deeper into this. But I'll just tell you now that, you remember I said one of the problems with the animal companion before was that it didn't scale. Well, they scale now. And so I think this is super cool. And we'll get into details in a minute, but just hold in mind that now your companion scales. As you level, your animal companion becomes more powerful. So, imagine your third level ranger, you get a wolf as your companion. And let's say you advance to level 6 with that wolf as your companion. The wolf is now more powerful. It's grown in power since you first called it. It is no longer just a normal wolf. It's more powerful now. And something happens and your wolf is killed. I think from an immersive storytelling, in-world point of view, it makes much more sense that you're able to use your magic to call that wolf spirit back and form a new body for it. And now you've kind of reincarnated or resurrected your wolf companion. And it's the same wolf. It had, it remembers its time with you. It has the same personality. It's the same wolf in a new body. I think that makes a lot more sense than you magically find another wolf that is not just a normal wolf, but is more powerful and is exactly the same level of power as the wolf you had before. I think the way it was done before when the animal companion didn't scale made sense. It was fine. It's like, okay, your wolf died, so you summon a new wolf to replace it because it's just a normal wolf. All the wolves are the same mechanically. But I don't think that would make as much sense with this now that your wolf is going to scale and gain new abilities and whatnot. I think it makes a lot more sense conceptually and thematically that instead you bring the wolf back to life. And I think that another aspect of this is to understand why a lot of players are playing Rangers, and specifically players that are playing the Beastmaster or now the Beast Conclave Ranger, is a lot of those players are playing that because they want a character who has an animal companion. And those types of players often see that type of companion as much as part of their character as the Ranger is. So, these kinds of players, they're going to have a name for that wolf. And that wolf is as much a character to them as their ranger is. So that player is going to be just as upset when that wolf dies as they would be if their character died, if their ranger died. And having the ranger summon another wolf, a different wolf, is about the same as re-rolling a new character for that player, right? They would much rather be able to bring back the original wolf in some way so that they have this shared history with this animal. And part of their story is, my wolf that served me faithfully for years, was killed defending me, and I was able to bring it back instead of just going to the pet store and getting a new wolf. So, I know that some people, are kind of like, I don't know about this bringing the animal back from the dead. I don't know, if that really fits for the ranger for me. But keep in mind that player that wants to play the Beastmaster Ranger and how important their companion is to them. And this is directly serving the needs of that player, which most likely, I'd say chances are good. If you have a player playing a Beastmaster Ranger, that's what they're wanting. They're wanting that bond with that companion. They're wanting that companion to be as much a part of their character as the actual Ranger is. And that player is going to much prefer this to the old method in the player's handbook. All right, next we have Companion's Bond. And again, this is a aspect of the Beast Ranger, Beastmaster, Beast Conclave Ranger that has changed. Your animal companion gains a variety of benefits while it is linked to you. The animal companion loses its multi-attack action if it has one, but it's going to get cool stuff to replace it. So don't fret. The companion obeys your commands as best it can. It rolls for initiative like any other creature, but you determine its actions, decisions, attitudes, and so on. If you are incapacitated or absent, your companion acts on its own. When using your Natural Explorer feature, you and your animal companion can both move stealthily at a normal pace. So gone is the animal using your initiative, And gone is you having to use your action to have your animal do something useful in combat. Your animal now has its own initiative, and you get to decide what it does in combat and still take all your own actions. So your animal companion is now operating more like an animal that you would summon, like if you're using the summon spells, or you're like what a druid would do, which is cool because there is always this disconnect between the ranger animal companion and animals that you summon. And, summoning creatures was much better, because you didn't use your action to have the summon creatures do things. So, this is a huge improvement to the animal companion. Your animal companion has abilities and game statistics determined in part by your level. Your companion uses your proficiency bonus rather than its own. In addition to the areas where it normally uses its proficiency bonus, an animal companion also adds its proficiency bonus to its armor class and to its damage rolls. Also, when you gain your animal companion at 3rd level, its proficiency bonus matches yours at +2. As you gain levels and increase your proficiency bonus, remember that your companion's proficiency bonus improves as well and is applied to the following areas: armor class, skills, saving throws, attack bonus, and damage rolls. Your animal companion gains proficiency in 2 skills of your choice. It also becomes proficient with all saving throws. So this is huge. It's getting its proficiency bonus to attack and damage rolls, which it didn't get before. Its proficiency bonus equals your proficiency bonus. So as your bonus goes up, its bonus goes up, which means its attack bonus goes up, its damage bonus goes up. And it gets proficiency in 2 skills that you get to pick. And it gets proficiency in all saving throws. For each level you gain after 3rd level, your animal companion gains an additional hit die and increases its hit points accordingly. So the hit points of your animal are also scaling. Whenever you gain the ability score improvement class feature, your companion's abilities also improve. Your companion can increase 1 ability score of your choice by 2, or it can increase 2 ability scores of your choice by 1. As normal, your companion can't increase an ability score above 20 using this feature unless its description specifies otherwise. So basically, whenever you get an ability score improvement, your animal companion does too, and it works the exact same way. Your companion shares your alignment and has a personality trait and a flaw that you can roll for or select from the tables below. Your companion shares your ideal, and its bond is always, the ranger who travels with me is a beloved companion for whom I would gladly give my life. So this is sweet too, giving your animal companion all the personality traits that an actual character would have. We have a sidebar here. Why no multi-attack? So, you notice you're getting a bunch of stuff you didn't get before with the animal companion, but it is losing its multi-attack. So here's some explanation of that, which again, if you're into designing stuff for your homebrew, these are the kinds of things to pay attention to. Multi-attack is a useful design tool that keeps monsters simple for the DM. It provides a boost in offense, but that boost is meant to make a beast threatening for one battle. A notion that doesn't mesh well with a beast intended to fight with the party rather than against it. Project multi-attack across an entire adventure, and an animal companion runs the risk of outclassing the fighters and barbarians in the party. So in story terms, your animal companion has traded in some of its ferocity in the form of multi-attack for better awareness and the ability to fight more effectively in concert with you. And one thing that I like that this is illustrating very well is how your design, if you're homebrewing, your design as far as mechanically how the thing works should really parallel very well the story concept of what's going on. And this does that. We have another sidebar, expanding companion options. Depending on the nature of your campaign, the DM might choose to expand the options for your animal companion. As a rule of thumb, a beast can serve as an animal companion if it is medium or smaller, has 15 or fewer hit points, and cannot deal more than 8 damage with a single attack. In general, that applies to creatures with a challenge rating of 1/4 or less, but there are exceptions. So you'll remember that we lost some choices with the animal companion. In the player's handbook version, you got to pick any beast that was CR 1/4 or lower. And in this version, you're limited to the ape, black bear, boar, giant badger, giant weasel, mule, panther, or wolf. However, we have this sidebar here that says if the DM wants, you can make other animals available. And what's nice is you're given more guidelines here. So instead of just saying CR 1/4 or less, they're getting into the specifics of what really makes it appropriate. And that comes down to how many hit points it has, how much damage it can do. And, they're saying in general, a beast that's 1/4 CR or less will fit, but there are exceptions on both sides. I'm assuming on both sides. I haven't gone and looked to verify, but presumably there may be CR 1/4 animals that maybe, or beasts, I should say, that maybe have more hit points or do more damage that wouldn't be appropriate as a companion for those reasons. And there might be beasts that are higher than CR 1/4, but might still work as an animal companion because they fit these other parameters as far as how much damage they do and how many hit points they have. So I like that you're given a bit more to go on as a DM here if you want to go outside of the basic choices and maybe, consider other possibilities. We're then given a table for traits and flaws for your animal companion, and you can roll a d6 for each of those or choose, just like traits and flaws for a character. And we have a new ability here beginning at 4th level. You get coordinated attack. And, one thing I want to note here is when you look at the progression table for the Ranger, you may notice that at 5th level on the table, it no longer says extra attack. So the Ranger in the player's handbook, when you look at the class progression table, level 5, you get extra attack. And that is no longer on the table because that is now part of your archetype. And the reason is that as a Beastmaster Ranger, you don't get extra attack. Instead, you get this coordinated attack ability, which says, beginning at 5th level, you and your animal companion form a more potent fighting team. When you use the attack action on your turn, if your companion can see you, it can use its reaction to make a melee attack. So we will see that the other archetypes of Ranger at 5th level in the archetype is getting the bonus attack feature, but the Beast Conclave Ranger doesn't and instead gets coordinated attack. So basically, instead of getting an extra attack yourself, you're getting an extra attack for your animal, but it is a little bit more limited because the animal has to be able to see you and the animal has to use its reaction for that attack. But I think that it's pretty cool and maybe balancing a little bit, some of the power-ups that the Beast Ranger is getting here. Another ability, Beast Defense. At 7th level, while your companion can see you, it has advantage on all saving throws. So at this point, not only does your beast now have proficiency in all saving throws with your proficiency bonus, it also now has advantage on those saving throws. So much more survivability of your animal companion here. Storm of Claws and Fangs. At 11th level, your companion can use its action to make a melee attack against each creature of its choice within 5 feet of it with a separate attack roll for each target. So basically, your beast gets whirlwind attack, which is pretty cool. And Superior Beast Defense. At 15th level, whenever an attacker that your companion can see hits it with an attack, it can use its reaction to halve the attack's damage against it. So they've done a lot here to improve the survivability of the animal companion, which was a really big problem before, or another really big problem before in the previous animal companion, was that, they just, at higher levels, the animal companions would just get one shot all the time. So now, they have more hit dice and they have better saving throw bonuses and they have advantage on saving throws. And they basically have I think it's called dodge, the rogue ability or uncanny dodge that they get, where whenever it gets hit, it can use its reaction to take half damage from that hit. So I think all of these things are going to make your companion stick around more in a fight and not get just offed easily like it used to. And you can now effectively resurrect well, I guess resurrect is a better term than reincarnate, because it's coming back in the same type of body at least. So pretty cool stuff. So big changes to the Beastmaster Ranger, now called the Beast Conclave Ranger. And I'm a huge fan of these changes. I think just getting away from, the animal companion using your action is huge. And having it scale both offensively and defensively with your character level is huge. And I think this is going to solve the problems. I haven't done math or deep analysis on this to know how this stacks up power-wise with the other Ranger archetypes and with the other classes and archetypes out there. And it may still be underpowered compared to some others. It may even still be the weakest. But I think that it's to the point now where even if that is the case, and again, I don't know if it is or not, but even if it is, it's not going to be such a huge difference in power level that people that want to play this type of character are not going to play it or are going to be punished for playing it. I think that they will be very effective in a party, and even if they are slightly underpowered, which again, I'm not saying that they are, I don't know, but even if they are, that difference is going to be small enough that, that player isn't going to feel bad playing that character, and the party isn't going to feel bad having a Beast Conclave Ranger in the party. All right, now we have the Hunter Conclave Ranger, which is replacing the Hunter archetype. And this is pretty much the same. The only difference, the only change that I saw here is, again, the extra attack benefit that you get at 5th level has moved from the Ranger table to being a Hunter Conclave ability. So you still, as a Hunter Ranger, get extra attack at 5th level. It's just now considered an archetype ability instead of a class ability, because again, the Beast Conclave Ranger does not get extra attack. They instead get the coordinated attack with their companion. But other than that, Hunter Conclave, exactly the same as the Hunter Ranger in the player's handbook, because again, Hunter Rangers are fine. They didn't need fixed. All right, and we have a third archetype for the Ranger now, the Deep Stalker Conclave. And this is pulling in the Deep Stalker Ranger archetype that was released in a previous Unearthed Arcana. So the Deep Stalker Ranger was unveiled in the Unearthed Arcana called Light, Dark, and Underdark. And I will have a link to that in the show notes as well at starwalkerstudios.com. All right, so there are a few small changes to this. For the most part, it's very similar to what is in the Unearthed Arcana Light, Dark, and Underdark. So one change that was made is in the previous version, you got the ability to hide as a bonus action, and that has been removed in this version, and you get a different ability instead. And that ability is that you are also adept at evading creatures that rely on dark vision. Such creatures gain no benefit when attempting to detect you in dark and dim conditions. Additionally, when the DM determines if you can hide from a creature, that creature gains no benefit from its dark vision. The other ability that you get that did not change is that at 3rd level, you mastered the Art of Ambush. On your first turn during combat, you gain a +10 bonus to your speed, and if you use the attack action, you can make an additional attack. So that's a pretty cool combination with one of the abilities you get under Natural Explorer that all Rangers get in this new version, which is on your first turn during combat, you have advantage on attack rolls against creatures that have not yet acted. So, if on that first turn, if you're a Deep Stalker Ranger and you attack someone who hasn't acted yet, you get advantage on them and you get an additional attack, which is pretty sweet. All right, Deep Stalker magic. The one change here is the clarification. So at 3rd level, you gain dark vision out to a range of 90 feet, which it got before. But now there's a clarification that says if you already have dark vision, you increase its range by 30 feet, which is pretty sweet. Other than that, the magic is the same. The spell list and when you get spells is the same. Another change is, again, like the Hunter Conclave, we now have extra attack as an archetype ability that the Deep Stalker gets. So again, extra attack is no longer on the class table. It's now an archetype thing. So at 5th level as a Deep Stalker, you get extra attack. And other than that, the rest is the same as the version we saw before. 7th level, you get Iron Mind, which gives you proficiency in wisdom saving throws. At 11th level, you get Stalker's Flurry. Once on each of your turns, when you miss with an attack, you can make another attack. And at 15th level, you get Stalker's Dodge. Whenever a creature attacks you and does not have advantage, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the creature's attack roll against you. You can use this feature before or after the attack roll is made, but it must be used before the outcome of the roll is determined. I really like that they made the Deep Stalker part of this. I really like the Deep Stalker. I have a player, Craig, is playing a Deep Stalker Ranger in my Curse of Strahd campaign, and it's a very effective class, and I think it's going to be more effective as part of this new Ranger than it was before. So that is the extent of the changes and the revision to the Ranger class. And, if we look through all this and we ask ourselves, does this address the major problems that have been perceived with the Ranger? And those problems being specifically with the Beastmaster Ranger, that the animal companion wasn't effective because its abilities didn't scale at all with the Ranger character. The Ranger had to use his action to have the animal do anything remotely useful in combat. And defensively, the abilities of the animal companion didn't scale and its hit points didn't scale. So they were often just one shot at higher levels and would just die all the time. And finally, with the changes that we've made and having the animal scale, we've also addressed the conceptual problem of what happens when an animal dies and you bring back another animal just like it. It doesn't completely make sense that you somehow find another wolf that's just as advanced as the wolf you had before. And also, I think more importantly, addresses the issue of what does a player that plays this character want, right? And a lot of players that are playing a Beastmaster Ranger want a companion that's as much a part of their character as the Ranger is, and a companion that can have a developed personality and, be a part of the character. And that player is not going to be happy when that companion dies and they have to get a different one. That player would much rather bring back the original companion, and now they can do so. And the animal companions now get personality traits, and we're given tables just for the animal companion for some of those traits, further, empowering that player to have that animal be an actual character and have that animal be a character that has just as much chance of surviving and being able to be returned from death as a player character would. And I think that's super cool and awesome. So have these all been addressed? And I think that they have. The problem with the Beastmaster, or the problems, I think have been solved. The animal now scales both offensively and defensively. In addition to just scaling, it's getting proficiency with saving throws. It's getting advantage on saving throws eventually. It's getting the equivalent of the uncanny dodge ability eventually. And, you can bring your companion back, so if your companion dies, you don't get some other companion that's just like it, but isn't the same creature, doesn't have the same memories and personality. So from an RP perspective, that's a big deal. You also don't have to worry about, what happens if I'm 6th level? Do I get a 1st level companion, or you don't have to worry about any of that because it's the same companion. So we noted that the animal companion now takes 50 gold worth of rare herbs and fine food to bring forth. And something that's interesting is if you return your animal companion to life after it's killed, it only costs 25 gold of rare herbs and fine food to do so. So basically, if your animal companion is killed, it costs half as much gold to bring it back than it would to get a new companion. I think that's kind of cool. On the one hand, it kind of incentivizes the player to keep the same companion, which I think is better for a continuity of the story of a campaign, that they keep a companion for a longer period of time, and as opposed to every time it dies, they get something different. I also think it would incentivize them to not min-max so much, instead of being like, oh, well, right now we're in a cavern or an underground thing, so I'm going to get this animal companion. And oh, this week we're in the forest, so I'm going to get this animal companion. It kind of discourages that. First of all, every time you get an animal companion, it now costs you money. And also, if you're getting a different one, it costs more than if you're resurrecting your current companion that died. So I think it kind of, it penalizes the munchkins a little bit, which I think is appropriate. And it also kind of helps out that player who is probably the player wanting to play the Beastmaster to begin with, the player that really is into their animal companion and is like, hey, if you're going to stick with the same companion, it's going to cost you less to get that back when it dies than it would if you're just changing companions all the time. And I think that's really cool. I really like that. So personally, did they address the issues with the Beastmaster? I think they did. I think they addressed all of them. Have they solved the problems, without playtesting, just looking at it on paper? I think that they have. As far as the Ranger overall, not just looking at the Beastmaster specifically, have they addressed the problems? I think that they have. I think that they've made the favored enemy more relevant and more effective. You're now getting a damage bonus, so it has some relevance in combat where before it didn't. And I think they've also amped up the Natural Explorer feature quite a bit by letting you have those benefits in all terrains, not having to pick one. And also, at all times, you're able to ignore difficult terrain. You get advantage on initiative, which is pretty cool and very thematic with the Ranger, kind of like always being prepared and always having the situation assessed and knowing what to do. So I think giving advantage on initiative reflects that mechanically really well. And also they get the ability that on your first turn in combat, you have advantage on attack rolls against creatures that haven't acted yet. So again, kind of bringing in the thematic element of being the ambusher and, being able to have an edge on people that thematically aren't aware of you or are surprised by you. And I think that's what's represented by acting before they've had a chance to act, because that's how surprise works in 5th edition is, you're surprised until you get a chance to act, and then you're no longer surprised. So I think that they've addressed the problems that we've seen in the Ranger, both overall and specifically in the Beastmaster. They've addressed those. I think they've fixed them, and they've done it in thematic ways that fit people's concept of what a Ranger is and what a Ranger should be able to do. And I think just out of the gate, no matter what archetype you choose, that your Ranger is now going to be able to do those things that you think a Ranger should be able to do. For instance, being able to get along better with animals and being able to be more effective in natural settings and really in all settings now, which I think is cool. So you can even do the urban ranger concept if you want, and that completely is allowed by this, and you don't even need a separate archetype for it. And I think it's great, and I'm really excited about this. I'm really excited to see someone play it in one of my games and see how it goes. And I'm really excited to hear what the reaction is from players once people have had a chance to play these Rangers, what the consensus is. Do most people feel that this has solved the problems or not? I'm very hopeful. Again, you don't really know with this stuff until, it's play tested. So we'll have to see. But right now I'm very optimistic and hopeful that this is going to really make the Ranger what people want it to be and make it stand up well, especially the Beastmaster or the Beast Conclave with the other classes in 5th edition. And finally, once again, I just want to send thank you and kudos to Wizards for even taking the time and money and effort to do this to begin with. You definitely didn't have to, but this was a problem seen in the game by a lot of groups and players and DMs, and Wizards has decided to address it. And I think they've done an excellent job. Over the last year, we've seen some stuff in the Unearthed Arcana as they've worked through this and tried different things and gotten feedback. And now we have this revised version. And again, they're going to solicit feedback on this. So keep an eye on the surveys, and they may revise it again and even yet again, if necessary, to get the Ranger where everybody wants it to be. And personally, I'm also happy and excited about this because I'm a big fan of the Ranger. And, if I were to play in a D&D campaign, a Ranger would definitely be a character type I would consider. And I'm much more likely to choose a Ranger now with these changes than I would have been before. All right, well, that's going to wrap up episode 121 of Game Master's Journeys. Thank you so much for tuning in with me today. I hope I hear from you what you thought of this episode. What do you think of the changes to the Ranger? Do you think that Wizards has nailed it and they've solved the problems that needed to be solved? Do you think that they went far enough and did enough? Are you happy with the changes that they made? Do you think that the Ranger's where it needs to be now? Is there something you think they missed? Is there something that they've introduced that you think is underpowered or overpowered? What do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Also, any feedback about any of the topics we've discussed recently. And again, I'll remind you that I'm doing the Theater of the Mind episode soon and the Keeping Interest High Between Sessions episode soon. So if you have any ideas for either of those, definitely let me know. I want to bring in as much listener ideas and thoughts on those topics as I can when I do those episodes. In the meantime, I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Stanko, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.